So welcome to today's Masterclass with Phoenix and ZapCarbon from alerts to action. Respiratory conditions like asthma, anxiety over unsafe homes and stress from delayed repairs are all health consequences of housing issues, and they're preventable. With the introduction of Awaab's law, housing providers must show not just that they've acted, but they've prevented harm. And as more landlords install IoT devices and look for tech-led ways to comply, one challenge keeps emerging of how to actually use the data. For many, there's a sense of being flooded with alerts but false positives, data fatigue, and unclear workflows that may be blocking progress. So in this masterclass, we're going to explore how Phoenix Community Housing saw reported issues drop by more than a half. So the key areas we're going to look at today is why trusting your data is the difference between collecting information and doing something meaningful with it. What makes a good client? Which housing providers seem ahead of the sector in making data-led decisions and why? Some lessons from the front line of how practical knowledge shapes better digital workflows, and how AI might change this field and the opportunities for housing providers over the coming months. So I'm delighted that we've got two colleagues joining us today. John Ball, who's Head of Planned Maintenance at Phoenix Community Housing Group. John's worked there for over 45 years. He's the longest serving employee, which is amazing. He obviously started very young. And he's played a key role in shaping Phoenix's data-informed, resident-led approach to managing homes. He'll explain how his team is using sensor intelligence to spot risk early, cut down on repeat visits, and create safer, healthier living environments. And we've also got Dominique joining us, who's the Head of R&D at ZapCarbon. Dominique brings a deep experience from ZapCarbon's work across more than 50,000 homes, offering a grounded view of what predictive compliance genuinely requires. And she'll explore the realities behind the data, from managing those false positives to securing frontline buy-in, and introduce Zap IQ, their latest platform designed to close the gap between information and acting on it. So I'm delighted now to hand over to Dominique, who's going to start us off.
Thank you, Jenny. Lovely to be here. So thank you for the introduction. Today, I'm going to talk about the value of sensor data, the challenges that we've experienced with it over the years of having installed more than 35,000 sensors. I'm also going to talk about how best to utilize it, maximize the value of it. And I'm going to talk from a data agnostic perspective. So irrespective of hardware supplier, the principles that I'm going to share apply to all sensor data. But essentially what I'm going to do today is take the conversation back to basics, because that is something that I feel has been slightly neglected in the sensor data industry, is that we haven't helped housing associations really understand the data and data interpretation at its most basic level. So to give a little bit of context today, I'm going to just share a little bit about ZapCarbon. So since 2012, ZapCarbon has collaborated with housing associations to improve the energy efficiency of homes. We have two main interests. One is tackling climate change, and the other one is social upliftment. And so we actively engage with residents to create healthier living environments. This is something we do very strongly. We have a strong focus on education. And we also design innovative technologies and services for health and housing with two areas of expertise: net zero and carbon reduction, and of course, damp and mold prevention. So within damp and mold, we have installed more than 35,000 sensors. We have done more than 50,000 damp and mold assessments, including a strong focus on education. And we have cleaned more than 240,000 surfaces. So we all appreciate that mold is a very complex issue, and there are many costs associated with it, not only costs to physical health and mental health, but also costs to the fabric of the building. And there are also many factors that contribute to damp and mold. Overcrowding, having 5 people live in a property shows a very different humidity profile to just 2 people living in a property. Then we also have the issue of non-compliant residents. Sometimes they are non-compliant for very valid reasons. There's a fine, delicate balance between managing the relationship and managing the asset, and helping to manage the relationship sometimes goes a longer way in helping to protect the asset long term. Then we also have the issue of fuel poverty and underheating, probably one of the most profound contributors to damp and mold. Not only fuel poverty, which is the legitimate inability to afford heating, but also underheating, the willingness to not heat, not understanding the value of heating a home, not wanting to allocate resources to it, not understanding how important it is to live in a warm home for health and well-being. And then, of course, we've got resident property management issues, and these make it harder to pinpoint root cause, to diagnose root cause of damp and mold. They tend to overlay what might really be happening in a property, or at least they contribute to it as well. Then we've got the issue of surveys only capturing a moment in time, and that's why sensors are so important. Sensor data fills in the gaps between survey visits. But if there are sensors installed, at best there is confusion on how best to use the sensor data, and that's what we will be addressing today. So we know that there are many benefits to temperature and humidity sensors. They offer continuous 24/7 monitoring. And as I said earlier, they help fill in the gaps of what's happening in a property in between visits from a temperature and humidity perspective. They allow for early detection of damp and mold, specifically if sensor data is used in a predictive, proactive way, which is highly encouraged. They help pinpoint root cause faster. So if a surveyor is good at interpreting sensor data, he can quickly look up what's happening in a property and then, armed with that information, go into the property and help diagnose what might be happening. He's guided quicker by having sensor data ahead of time. Prioritizing properties most at risk, really good way of organizing or prioritizing severity is to look at sensor data in a proactive way. And then, of course, it can help identify fuel poverty risk and underheating. Monitor interventions. This is a big one that is underutilized, very much underutilized. So when works have been completed in a property, how often is the sensor data looked at to see if the works have actually resolved the issue? And of course, sensor data that demonstrate compliance for Awaab's law. So many benefits of temperature and humidity sensors. Theoretically and intuitively, we all know they offer profound benefits, but in reality, they are an extremely valuable resource that is underutilized. And this is something we have realized over the years working with thousands of sensors. One reason for this is that it's very difficult to implement sensor data into already established operational processes. And so turning data into meaningful action doesn't happen. So the one thing that we have learned from analyzing data from 35,000 sensors is that the data is almost useless without survey data and individual property level interpretation. And even though damp and mold is not easy to solve, the question we are now asking is, what if intelligent use of sensor data, together with survey results, could help eradicate damp and mold for good in many more properties? So the first step is to have office teams and managers and surveyors, anybody working in damp and mold remediation, to get really good at being able to track a range of metrics. So understanding ventilation patterns, whether they are healthy or unhealthy. Understanding heating patterns. Is the property heated optimally or suboptimally? Is a property in high humidity risk? And how long is the property in high humidity risk? Is there an effective ventilation pattern that reduces the high humidity? And then we've got high condensation risk as well, which is slightly different to high humidity risk. So properties in high humidity risk might not always fall into condensation risk. It all depends on how well they are heated and how well they are ventilated. And then we've got underheating, of course, which is a really big issue. And particularly in properties that are underheated, in order to preserve the little bit of heat that is present in the property, residents tend to underventilate as well. And what we all know is that the combination of high humidity with low temperature is a very big risk factor for mold growth. Then, of course, we've got heat loss. Measuring how quickly a property loses heat, very important in retrofit. Then we've got the opposite, which is overheating, how quickly a property overheats, especially over the summer seasons with heat waves, and we'll be getting more heat waves in the future. And of course, air quality index is another parameter. Not all sensors offer this, but if they do, it's important to understand what is happening from an air quality perspective in a property. So the one question we get asked a lot in training sessions with very mixed opinions is it a good idea to install a sensor in the bathroom? And oftentimes we get asked this because the thinking is a bathroom is generally a source of a lot of moisture buildup. So isn't the sensor just going to be an alert all the time? Which is really a valid question to ask. So I'm hoping in the next 4 slides, we'll understand differently how important it is to actually have a sensor in the bathroom and what insight it can give us. Again, it's about returning back to basics, understanding sensor data in relation to humidity buildup and in relation to ventilation practice. So in this example, there is a sensor installed in the bathroom. And if we turn our attention to the top graph, on the y-axis, we've got relative humidity. And on the x-axis, we've got time. And generally, we encourage residents to keep their humidity below 65% on average. So this is the 65% perforated line cutoff. However, in a bathroom or in a kitchen, we will expect humidity to rise in any property because bathing and showering is going to produce a lot of moisture, and that is normal, and that is not problematic. The important thing to note is how quickly that humidity is extracted from the property. So here we can see the bathrooms being used, and very quickly, within an hour or two, the humidity has been extracted out and the humidity levels return back to baseline. Again, bathroom is used, humidity drops straight away, which is what we want to see with a healthy ventilation pattern with an optimally working extractor fan. And so this we would regard as healthy bathroom management, good practice. This little graph here is just an example of real data indicating the same. So in the next example, we have a similar sort of profile where the moisture goes up when the bathroom is being used, and then as the extractor fan is being utilized, it extracts the humidity out of the bathroom within an hour or two. However, what's happening here is that the baseline humidity is not dropping to below the 65% mark, which is what it should be doing in optimal ventilation. So a surveyor went out to check what was happening. He looked at this data and he thought, okay, something's not quite right with the extractor fan. And then when he went in, he realized that the extractor fan was switching off with the light. So there was no post-run time. So the post-run time is important to actually keep the residual humidity to below baseline. So this was a lovely example of how a suboptimal extractor fan, or at least the settings weren't right, and that was indicated in the sensor data profile. And here, if you look at this bottom graph, it's a little bit messy, but if you know what you're looking for, you can actually see this profile quite nicely, where the humidity drops but not low enough. Easily remedied situation. In the third example, again, a sensor is installed in the bathroom and the bathroom is being used, so we have the rise in humidity. And instead of seeing the sharp drop, here we are seeing a very slow and gradual decay. And again, humidity goes up when the bathroom is used again, and again, very slow, gradual decay. The problem with slow, gradual decay is that the moisture will settle on cold surfaces. And if it lingers around a long time for several hours, it is going to increase risk of damp and mold. So in this particular situation, the extractor fan is either broken or the resident is not using it. So knowing this information ahead of time, a surveyor can go into a property and ask important questions, at least assess if the extractor fan is working, or secondly, if it is, ask the resident why it's not being used. And we can see that gradual decay here in the data below, in the real data below. Now, these examples are particularly problematic if a bathroom does not have a window, because if the moisture cannot escape out of a bathroom window, it is going to move out of the bathroom into the rest of the property, and it's going to condense on cold surfaces elsewhere and increase risk of damp and mold in other parts of the home. So in this example, we've got the blue curve shows optimal extractor fan, optimal flow rate, and the orange curve indicates suboptimal flow rate. So in this situation, the extractor fan is not quite strong enough to remove the humidity as quickly as in the blue curve. And this might not be problematic in a situation where there's a bathroom window. But if we are dealing with bathrooms that do not have windows, and properties are suffering from damp and mold, something like this gives us a lot of insight into what might be happening with the extractor fan. Here we can see that the resident is using the extractor fan, but it's just taking a little bit longer for it to drop to below baseline. And any moisture that hangs around a little bit too long, especially in a property that is prone to damp and mold, is going to cause a problem. So in the next example, we've got 2 sensors installed, one in the bathroom and one in the hallway. And here we can see that every time the bathroom is being used, there is a synchronous spike in humidity in the hallway sensor as well. So what this would indicate is that the resident is not containing moisture in the bathroom. The moisture that is being built up is going out of the bathroom, but not through the extractor and not through the window, but into the rest of the property. And this is will increase risk of mold growth in other parts of the home. So this is a lovely example of how having 2 sensors, we can get quite a lot of information on what might be happening. And here, it can initiate a constructive conversation with the resident to say, look, I can see that, a lot of the moisture is coming out of the bathroom. What is the reason for this? Why is, can we help you make sure that the moisture is going out the right way? In the next example, we have a sensor in the bathroom and one in the bedroom. And the bathroom and bedroom are linked by an adjoining wall. And here the adjoining wall had a pipe stack that had a leak in it. So every time the bathroom was being used, we'd see a rise in humidity in the bathroom and then, of course, a rise in humidity in the bedroom as well. So this would give us really good information predictively. If we are looking at sensor data from a predictive angle, an algorithm could pick this up and alert us to the fact that there might be a leak in this property ahead of even the resident phoning in to let us know. This is a lovely example of where multi-room monitoring is very beneficial. Multi-room monitoring meaning more than one sensor installed in a property. So now if we turn our attention to what sensor data looks like in a bedroom, we have an example here. This is one of our demonstration properties. We've got there's a family of 4 living in this property, and we have got sensors installed in 8 sensors installed in this property, and we've been monitoring it to try and understand how a resident behavior affects sensor data, and it's been a kind of a long-term study for us. But in this graph, we can see we've got the 65% perforated line quite high up. It's an auto-scaled graph, and then we've got time on the x-axis. And here we can see that there are two children living in this room, in this bedroom. And at night, the humidity is slightly on the higher side, but within the normal range. And then in the day, when the children go to school, it drops, and then it goes up again at night. And humidity is supposed to build up at night. We are breathing biological beings. We are going to create moisture. That's not the problem. But here, the amount of moisture that is being created in this room is generally below the 65% mark, and the room is able to accommodate the amount of moisture creation. There's enough ventilation to deal with the moisture that is created. It doesn't really matter what the profile looks like. What's important to note is that in this bedroom, all the sensor data falls below the 65% mark. This would be an example of a healthy humidity profile. Now, in contrast, let's look at what an unhealthy humidity profile might look like. Again, the 65% cutoff is here, and we can see there's a lot of humidity buildup above 70%. Not much of an evident ventilation pattern, just a lot of humidity building up, moisture's getting trapped, increasing risk of condensation, and of course, mold risk. Now, this might be as a result of some leak, or it could be that it could also be as a result of resident property management issues. So knowing that a bedroom is suffering in this way, it would direct a surveyor straight to that room to understand what might be happening. And in this example, this is an overcrowding example. A lot of people living in a property is going to increase the humidity profile. There will be frequent spikes from daily activities, a lot of overlap, little recovery time, and then more moisture is generally created than what is extracted or ventilated out. And of course, in an overcrowding scenario, there's a high risk of condensation and mold growth. And in situations like this, it is really a good idea to explore other ventilation strategies. And then when they are explored, to really monitor if they are indeed living up to their promise. So if we turn our attention to heating, World Health Organization encourages that temperatures sit between 18 and 21 degrees. Here we've got temperature on the y-axis, time on the x, And if you just focus on the blue curve, you can see it's at about 19 degrees. And this is evidence of really good thermostatic control. There are no obvious irregular spikes in heating characteristic of on-demand heating. The heating doesn't drop to below the 17-degree mark at all. So this is a really well-heated room. And then in contrast, we have a situation here of an underheated room where the temperatures are just above 12 degrees. We can see there's a slight little bit of rise, possibly the heating kicked in a little bit or was switched on demand, but not enough to bring it to above the 17-degree mark, other than this one little bump here. But generally, this is a chronically underheated room. And the problem with cold air is that it holds less water vapor. And because it's a relative scale, if air is saturated sooner, it's going to condense on cold surfaces, increasing risk of mold growth. So when we do sensor training, sensor data interpretation training with our surveying teams and office management teams, we ask for feedback on this slide, that what might be happening in the situation. And here we can see we've got, in the temperature graph, we've got a very stable temperature of about possibly 15 degrees, really low, underheated, not much activity happening here. And then if we look at the humidity curve, we've got also not much activity in the humidity profile at all, just kind of like a straight line. And because we are generally breathing biological beings that do take part in moisture-creating activities like cooking and bathing, it's normal to have more of a fluctuation. So this is an example of a voided property, an uninhabited. In fact, it's a basement property. It's got really high humidity because there was some water penetration as well. But it's good to become acquainted to what it might look like if the resident is no longer in the property, or perhaps an elderly resident that might have run into some trouble. So just to finalize, just to finish off, this is probably the most important slide in the whole presentation. And if we turn our attention to this example where we had the question of whether the extractor fan was working or whether the resident was not using the extractor fan, if a property is flagged for damp and mold risk proactively with sensor data, it's really important to investigate what might be happening, using sensor data as a guide step by step. So the first step would be to have a look at the sensor data profile, come up with some possible conclusions of what might be happening, and then checking in the maintenance logs to see, is there an open damp and mold case for this particular property? Has there been a survey? And if so, was a repair raised? And if a repair was raised, check the repair status. And if the repair was completed, then it's really important to revisit the sensor data and check that the sensor data has fallen back into the normal range. In other words, has the repair been successful? Or might there be another compounding issue that is affecting sensor data? So if there is another issue, then this property, the flow is not complete. We have to revisit what might still be happening using sensor data as a guide step by step. So if a repair was not raised, then it would be important to call the resident to check if the extractor fan is broken. And if it's not broken, ask the resident why the extractor fan is not being used. It could be something as simple as the isolator switch was switched off when a contractor was there, or maybe they don't know that they've got to use the extractor fan, so it could be that possible education is needed. And then additionally, it's important to check for, is there any vulnerability? Maybe the resident can't reach the extractor fan, or whatever other circumstances might be impacting. And step by step, continuously using the sensor data as a guide until the intervention has resulted in sensor data in the normal range.
So we're going to move across now to John, who's got a few slides to talk us about Phoenix's journey to Awaab's law and the benefits from sensors and next step with humidifiers. So John, across to you.
Hello everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Before I get into the main presentation, I just want to rewind a little bit to explain how we, and working with Healthy Homes, prepared for Awaab's law. The period preceding Awaab's law was, it's fair to say, characterised by a system that left many social housing tenants feeling unheard and powerless in addressing poor living conditions. There were no strict, legally enforceable timeframes for social landlords to fix serious hazards like damp and mould, and tenants often had to complain repeatedly while landlords took an unspecified amount of time to investigate and fix the problems. Decades of declining stock, deregulation and underinvestment created a landscape of neglect, particularly affecting the most vulnerable residents. So before Awaab's law, there was no strict deadlines. Landlords were not legally required to meet specific repair deadlines for hazards like damp or mould. There was long delays. Tenants' ability to get works completed and the issue resolved depended on the landlord's response, which could and did result in years of complaints with no little resolution. No guarantee of a fix. Before Awaab's law, the process lacked a mandate for landlords to act within a specific short time frame to make someone's home warm, safe and dry. There was a focus on the HHSRS, and while the HHSRS assessed hazards, it did not come with mandatory time-sensitive repair obligations. Blame. It's fair to say that some social housing providers and landlords may have automatically attributed moisture problems to the tenants' everyday activities, such as cooking, bathing, drying clothes indoors, or not properly heating or ventilating their homes. This, of course, was demonstrated in the tragic 2020 death of 2-year-old Awaab in the UK, where the Housing Association falsely blamed his family for ritual bathing for the fatal mould. So after Awaab's law, and now in effect since the 27th of October of this year, it heightened accountability, increased pressure to become more responsible and tenant focused. So stringent enforceable deadlines are in effect. Awaab's law mandates specific legally binding timeframes for investigating and repairing serious hazards, particularly damp and mould. Increased legal and regulatory risks. Due to the new timeframes for addressing hazards, stronger enforcement powers and increased financial and legal liabilities. Where we fail to comply, run the risk of severe financial, operational and reputational consequences. Awaab's law has and will represent a fundamental cultural shift in our sector, moving from the reactive and neglectful mindset to one of proactive, resident-focused accountability. Awaab's case revealed a systematic failure in which social housing landlords often ignore tenants' complaints and blame them for the conditions. Challenges for social housing providers. All face significant challenges with the introduction of Awaab's law due to financial constraints, operational strain from strict new timelines, the technical complexity of diagnosing and fixing damp and mould, record keeping, and the need for significant tenant education and engagement. We must also deal with the logistical and financial burden of alternative accommodation if needed. So opportunities and long-term implications. Opportunities, of course, it's an opportunity to improve quality of the homes our tenants live in and ensuring they are living in a home that they can be proud of and is warm, safe and dry. And the long-term goals is to transform our relationship between us and our residents. So who are we? Phoenix Community Housing started in 2007. And we're a non-profit resident-led housing association, and our model empowers tenants and leaseholders to take a central part in decision-making. Customer journey mapping, we met with our tenants who had experienced and had suffered from serious damp and mould problems. And we met with them to get a deeper understanding of their experiences when they reported damp and mould in their homes. We created a resident scrutiny panel, and as a result of that customer journey mapping exercise, we met with a smaller group of residents who worked with us to review and challenge and improve the service we offered. This panel put forward 16 recommendations that they wanted us to deal with. Damp and mould, Awaab's law was part of a transformation board project, and due to a fundamental change to our strategy, delivery and the culture of damp and mould, transformation board was set up where all PCH stakeholders, IT, housing management, repairs, etc., and implementation transformation projects. All the stakeholders are involved in identifying and implementing 7 phases. Resident engagement. Since 2021, we've engaged with our residents through many avenues. We organise residents events. We have leaflets. We have the Phoenix Academy. community gateway meetings where residents have a central role in decision making and service scrutiny, resident experience committees, a tenant and leaseholder consultative group, and we introduced in September our first damper mould resident awareness week, where residents that we identified through sensor use was invited to come to have a one-to-one discussion with us, which I'll talk about a bit more in a little while. It was important for all stakeholders buying for Awaab's law. We felt this was crucial as it would ensure effective implementation, prevent resistance, and secure the resources needed to achieve the law's goals and objectives. It was important that we had everyone on the same page. The fundamental shift was to ensure that our already good IT platforms were enhanced to efficiently manage, track, and to capture all record of all touch points with the resident. IT workshops and regular meetings covered case and repair management, damper mould record keeping, communication, proactive maintenance, tenant identification, compliance, efficiency, and the creation of good data dashboards that allows us to look at all cases that we received. One part of thing that we weren't particularly good of was triaging when our residents called, especially around damp and mould. Effective triaging is essential for us to meet strict deadlines and address hazards appropriately. By immediately and accurately assessing the severity of the reported issue and the vulnerability of the tenant, we can ensure fast, compliant, and most importantly, safe response. In Q4, which is from January of this financial year, we will be adopting video calls for all damp and mould calls. PCH policies and procedures have been adapted to suit Awaab's law, with our policy read tenant's responsibility detailing following any specific health and safety clauses in the tenancy agreement for tenant's handbook for their own health and safety. We ask our residents to be responsible and let us know immediately when they suffer from damp and mould. And other changes in that policy was to record as a tenant responsibility not to disarm extractor fans, not to disarm or remove sensors, and this is working well for getting the information back from those particular implementations and installs. Contractors, we have a strong in-house and subcontract repairs for both, which are critical for the implementation of Awaab law, and because also we've got a good working relationship with Healthy Homes. The missing pieces in our damp and mould jigsaw were found when in 2023 we began working with Healthy Homes, and our partnership has flourished, and we are still in that partnership today. Healthy Homes undertake a property assessment, so each assigned property receives a full Awaab's law compliant assessment, producing a digital Healthy Home performance certificate with photographic evidence, HHSRS-based risk clarification, and compliance grading. All assessments are digitally signed by the operative and the resident via the portal and are uploaded to Healthy Homes portal with time and data stamps. Healthy Homes at the visit remove visible mould using a safe, non-toxic cleaning solution suitable for occupied homes, including those with vulnerable residents. This is followed by the application of a non-toxic antimicrobial protective coating reduce reoccurrence, and all works are digitally evidenced before and after photographs, digitally signatures and timestamps recorded in the portal. Resident tenant advice. Healthy Homes at the visit provide resident actions that may be contributing causing the mould or condensation, and they provide the resident with advice to prevent it coming or returning, and educate in how central heating system works, boiler radiators or electric storage heaters, and temperature and humidity sensors. During the assessment, our residents will have a temperature and a humidity sensor installed. The sensor measures humidity levels in and room temperatures. Having these installed helps our residents to identify conditions that are associated with the formation of mould. These are installed to measure the atmospheric conditions, and they provide real-time data. They are installed in an area with the most mould and damp issues and are strategically placed to monitor and collect data on the key environment factors that cause the mould and damp in the property, and the sensors does not produce sound or an alarm. They are unobtrusive, offering discrete monitoring. Assessment and the cleaning shield. Proactive damp and mould management. Healthy Homes program involves experts assessing homes for risk related to humidity and temperature and ventilation. They use real-time data from in-house sensors to detect unsafe humidity levels and conditions conducive to mould growth before significant issues arise, enabling preventive actions. The data-driven approach and documented assessments help us demonstrate compliance with critical housing standards laws such as Awaab's law, which places strict requirements on us to address the hazards like mould promptly. Healthier Homes proactive work programs. It's allowed us to introduce proactive workloads and programs by understanding the causation. It was highlighted that extractor fans were the top issue in our tenants' homes, by fans being disarmed, broken and or missing. Sensor help to support Dominique's presentation. Sensors are a help for us because they allow early detection and damper mould. Sensors provide continuous real-time data on temperature and humidity levels with properties, acting as an early warning system for conditions conducive to mould growth, and this allows for interventions before minor problems become severe health hazards or cause structural damage. By shifting from reactive complaint-based approach to a proactive data-driven one, we can plan maintenance more efficiently. This prevents expensive late-stage repairs, such as replacing insulation or plaster, reduces emergency call-outs, and extends the lifespan of the building fabric. And better resident engagement. Data can be shared with residents via apps, providing them with personalised recommendations, e.g. about ventilation or heating use, to help manage their home environment and fostering a better communication and trust between landlords and tenants. Using Healthy Homes in the details provided by the installed sensors has allowed us to introduce tenant workshops where the top poor performing properties are identified and tenants are invited to training sessions and awareness sessions. So just some challenges. Workforce, capacity and training. So Phoenix have a fully trained workforce, enough to meet the strict deadlines. Diagnosing the repairs quicker. We have got the means to diagnose repairs to meet the stringent timeframes. Bespoke solutions, ventilation, warm homes to our older properties as a program of doing retrofit. Meeting the timeframes. This does present us with the most significant challenge. Data and record keeping. When the ombudsman come knocking, we have a full records of each case, of every interaction, photo, times and dates. Legal claims could result in costly settlements if all the previous discussed doesn't work. Alternative accommodation, shortage, hotel, voids, temporary decants, policy and costs are all challenging. The question I have is that if the risk is removed, will there be any reason for alternative accommodation? Reputational damage, increased media, public scrutiny, accused of blaming the tenant. Tenant education, encouraged to complain, regain trust, preventative measures, communication, how to report. Is it easy? Vulnerable tenants and understanding. Communication, inconsistent communication, wrong communication, updates, what is happening? Are the information and communication in the correct language? Is there more use of AI that could be considered? And one of the biggest challenges as well is the no accesses. Does this present the most significant challenge for where you work? With discussing those and identifying those, what else and how could they be resolved? So, the next steps. Sensor installs. We hope to install sensors to all our properties. We have them installed through Healthy Homes visits, and we install them in new voids and when we complete works through proactive work streams. Dehumidifiers. We're currently in the process of organising a pilot scheme of the installation of wall-mounted dehumidifiers systems to interior walls, and we're doing that pilot scheme with the assistance of healthy homes. Finding proactive work streams to include other identified causation. Our investigations have highlighted that condensation is still the most common cause of mould growth. We offset this by a comprehensive extractor fan renewal program. However, with the other 9 causation reasons, we are to develop program work streams around these. Location. We're looking at the locations of the properties where the Warm Homes Initiative can be used, where we can increase in ventilation, where a patch on our stock increase tenant awareness and training, and with leakages that cause a higher proportion of the damp and the mould growth, looking at self-closing devices that shuts water down if a leak occurs. We're in preparation and preparing for phase 2 of Awaab's law, expecting next year in 2026, when it will expand required repair timeframes beyond the emergency hazards for damp or mould, and will cover a wider range of issues, including those related to excess heat, cold, fire, electrical hazards and hygiene. In phase 3, the final phase set for 2027, will extend legal requirements to social housing landlords to address all remaining hazards under the Housing Health and Safety Rating System that pose a significant risk of harm. What we do at Phoenix, we continuously review. We will continue to look at new initiatives and learn and work with others to ensure that our tenants' homes remain warm, safe and dry. For Phoenix, the success of Awaab's law will be focused on response time, repair completion rates and the overall tenant satisfaction and safety outcomes. Our goal is, by working with our tenants and residents, a reduction in health hazards within their homes and to safeguard our tenants against harm caused by preventable issues like damp and mould. And finally, we've introduced a tagline for all our interactions with residents: make every contact count. We strive through our housing management staff, our repairs team, contractors, surveyors, home improvement surveyors, my plan maintenance team and all PCH where they interact with tenants to make every contact count. We ask about damp or mould and if the tenant is experiencing it anywhere in their home, so we can action a process of resolving that. So thank you for your time and listening to the presentation. I hope you found it useful. Thank you.
Brilliant, John. Thank you. Really interesting and shows how thorough you've been in your approach to go through that. And Dominique, so I was fascinated going through those graphs as well. Really interesting looking at when you've broken it down between looking at 1, 2 and 3 room and the difference in there. It really does start to tell a story, doesn't it? I was quite interested. So just really a couple of questions before we close. Dominique, what's the hardest bit of interpreting that data to then move on to investment interventions that need to happen? What, in your experience, what's the hardest bit?
I think that the biggest challenge, especially now with Awaab's law and how housing associations are really pressed for capacity, is having the allocation of resources to, say, having 1 or 2 people meet on a weekly basis to tackle properties in, for example, mould risk. And then to have the time and space to look at the data, make sure that the properties are being moved along the continuum toward health and well-being. It doesn't take very long to interpret the data, but I think what's tricky is just having 1 or 2 people be in charge of that. There is also a misconception amongst office teams and surveyors that you have to be a data analyst to be able to interpret and understand sensor data and apply it. And that's really not the case at all. With a little bit of training and understanding, sensor data can be understood within just a minute or 2. And then with that information, one is guided to dealing with the property in a better way.
Is that accountability for the information that comes through and allocating resource to ensure that you're using it rather than
Absolutely.
perhaps just reacting to what's seen, is using the information to proactively understand how you then move forwards?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. And John, for you then, you've obviously learned a lot in the process, not since you've been working with ZapCarbon and as we move through with the implementation of the legislation. What is there a bit that surprised you as you've gone through this?
I think No, I don't. Not really. No, I think that on the basis that the story I will tell is that when I was an apprentice plumber a million years ago, I would go to a property and I asked about this wall of mould. Yeah, and what's all that about? Because I didn't know. And he told me what was happening there. And I would suggest that we have still some properties that could be like that. So in my career, I haven't had the gift to change anything. And I think that with the technology we've got now, with the use of particularly the sensor, because what we do when we get a new case come through, we'll check to see if a sensor's been installed and we can see what's what and what's happening there. So we're pre-armed on that, so we know what's happening. And if that's the case, we will then contact the resident to say, look, if you could do this, do that, and help out. So that's a new initiative, which is brilliant. I think that the education is good. I think that it was interesting to set up, being a resident-led organisation, our scrutiny panel wanted me to meet with 6,500 families to talk about this. Well, we can't do that. So what we do, when we get the information monthly on the sensor data, we look at that and then we concentrate on the top 30 families where whatever we do, the mould's going to return. Yeah. So we concentrate on them, and that was agreed that was a way forward. But I think that we need our residents to help us. I think no access is a real big issue, and it always has been. And I think from the other H criteria or categories we have to deal with on the same basis of the 24-hour response. If my heating's not working, I want someone to come in to fix that. If I've got a leak, I want someone to come in to stop that. If I've got my electrics is down, I want someone to come and reinstate that. But with mould, they can leave it for a couple of days because it's not an immediate sort of like, it's not, we don't go to bed tonight and it's not there and it's there tomorrow. It's a progressive thing. So that is affecting no access. And as I say, we are looking to see how we can resolve that. The proactiveness of work programs, I think, is good, because what we do through Healthy Homes, they'll give us a causation of what's causing it. So we analyse that. And as I said in the presentation, it was noted that there was a lot of properties that either had an extractor fan that had been disarmed, they had an extractor fan that was not working, or properties, believe it or not, that didn't have them. So what we did, we introduced a good, comprehensive, proactive program to renew those, and that's helping because I think that the numbers are reflecting that. And then it's the awareness, because people will disarm them because they think it's going to cost hundreds of pounds to run, but the science and the costs are not that. And I think the other thing is that the awareness week was really good. We introduced that, and it was very interesting. I say Healthy Homes was there with us on that day, and it was a one-to-one interaction with the residents who were interested to see what it was. And I think that, and what one of my team did, they done a demonstration of how condensation works. So we filled it's like a size of a fish tank, and it fills up with moisture. Then we put the extractor fan on, and the moisture goes. And simple sort of like practical advice, like when people get into a car in the morning, the windows will steam up. So if you imagine that car is your bathroom, you've got moisture, you open your car window or you turn the heating on and it goes. Same principle as a room. So it's little things like that we've always used, to be fair, at Phoenix, but we're just re-emphasising from that. But I think that hopefully for my presentation, I wanted to give it a wider approach than just the sensors. And I think I did pick up how important the sensors are, and we will continue using those. And my plan is, my goal, if I'm still around, is that all of our properties have a sensor installed.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. And I think it's key, and you both said that actually the sensors is one part of the solution, but actually there's a whole load of other things around that really make it work, to be able to give you the better picture to know how to move forward. Thank you so much for your time today. Really informative masterclass. And we look forward to speaking to you both again soon. Thank you.